Badgley. I'll introduce myself in a second.
Like 2 or 3
I always
people.
like try to thank folks at the end,
but
and always run out of time.
Sort of same,
so I want to thank Nike, you guys, for hosting this. This is I've been out to your facilities. I love this place. This is so cool. We don't get to see these things often. I live in Atlanta, and we have a little warehouse-looking cool office. But
so the next question is, who here thinks they know a little something
so it's way
about
cool.
impact
So thank you for having us.
Who's heard of it?
Thanks to Hype Drive and Bratton Group. You guys haven't met Mary Louie.
It's a good thing that we're going to start
coordinating
from the
all this.
beginning and do this.
You get a chance to meet her, thank her, because she does
all right, my next question was going to be how many of you have actually built a map.
And I work for VersionOne, so I want to thank them that they pay for my build to come out here, which is awesome too. So it gives me a chance.
Very briefly, the obligatory about me slide.
So my talk, it's high performance. We can kind of hopefully make fun of some things here in a minute, but high performance doesn't happen overnight. I'm kind of sarcastic. I'll warn you guys ahead of time. So if I say things that's offensive, I don't work for Nike.
I've done a bunch of different.
So, and if you ever seen a VersionOne video, we kind of don't sometimes act right sometimes. So,
I don't tweet myself. If you do.
So my purpose, I love working with teams. I've worked with a few teams here. You guys are getting fun group. My goal is actually just to help people get better at stuff. I like to make software too. I like to build stuff myself.
So a couple more things before we get started. These are the two best resources about impact mapping, especially to get started. The impactmapping.org website.
Somebody goes, hey man,
and then of course
you're almost 50. I'm like, yeah, dude. He goes, how can you almost be 50? I said, we couldn't have kids. So we have no kids.
And
I'm like,
that he's not actually the one who really came up with this.
So I got lucky there. But we have 4 dogs, a great wife. We love going to the beach. This is about to get hit by the hurricane. So I'm like, crossing my fingers. So let's pray for that. And I have all kinds of contact ways to get a hold of me. It's just Matt.Badgley, VersionOne.com. Feel free to hit me if you have anything.
Anything that's not attributed.
We are going to do a couple little exercises in here. I like to always have people walk away with things and ideas.
All right. So the other thing is we will do an activity as part of this
take a few minutes. There's
little
note cards. You can write it in your notepads. I don't really care. But I want you to kind of note what are things that you want to suck less at.
We're just going to do a couple of sample.
And it could be you or your team. And think immediately. What are some things that your team's kind of struggling with? Just one or 2 to 3 things. So let's just take a couple minutes. Write down. There's some cards there if it's helpful, and some pens.
All right. I'd like to start off by setting a little bit to the stage of how I think impact mapping fits into the bigger context of Agile, since we are at an Agile conference. So this is our well-known Scrum model here, right? Arguably the most practiced version of Agile. And what we care about here in the end, of course, is what comes out. Should be pointing at something. Anyway, the little red box at the end, that's the working software, right? According to the Agile Manifesto, that is our primary measure of progress. That is what we really care about. And of course, because Agile is primarily defined as being about working software, it is still largely confined to the IT world. All right. We are trying to apply Agile in other parts of the business, and it is possible, but we're definitely still struggling with that.
What are we bad at?
So it's not easy. And of course, if Agile is really only contained to IT by and large, then often what we end up with is something that looks like this.
My favorite team I'm working with, and they just don't talk well to each other.
So we have a long requirements phase up front, often with no involvement from IT whatsoever.
They're all just
and from that cometh forth the backlog.
They don't talk much. So it's like, how do you get them out of their shell?
And that then rarely ever changes. Because,
so I hope you guys have a few.
Business folks have done all of our things.
So we're going to use these. So save these. We're going to use them in a bit here. So quick story, and I put this up here only because I grew up in an era where saying the word suck was bad.
That kind of stuff. Yeah, happens
all
the time. Right. And then the dev team,
it was 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade actually. My mom says it's 6th grade. I think it was 7th grade. But I was transferring from a school.
And there it sits until they are ready for
at the time, my friends already left and stuff like that. We were nomads.
Let me tell you, as someone who works with the federal government,
I was in an English class, and I was just bored, and I'm doodling, and I did write, this sucks.
Really lucky.
Nice big bubble letters. It looked really cool and everything.
Now we have
looked all creative, looked better than this.
And DevOps has dramatically improved
our
ability to push this wonderful working software out the door and get it into in front of our customers, which is awesome because we can finally.
As a kid, and I'm like just getting upset already. I'm like, oh gosh, what's going on? I'm getting in trouble for this.
Really changed,
and she takes the notepad, she walks with me,
and part of that is
sitting there in this room quietly.
The assumption in Agile
about 30
is
minutes
that
goes
the
by,
backlog
and next thing you know, my mother walks in the room.
It just kind of is, right? That's what we start
and with the vice principal,
we have
they sit across the table like an interrogation table.
We have a backlog
and
session,
just
but
like,
how the product owner is supposed to figure out
and
what
the only
goes
thing
into
out
the
of my mom's
backlog,
mouth
which
is, do
sequence
you
we're
know what
supposed
this
to work
means?
on all of this. Agile doesn't really.
And the only thing
as
a sixth grader you say is.
So how this backlog is created is just sort of big.
This is a bad word. I literally got kicked out of school for a day.
And then we work from it.
Because I wrote down this.
So why is that a problem?
And I look back on this and I go, okay, there was a learning from failure, right? Yeah, don't write things that the teacher can see. So you learn from failure that way. And then the other thing I learned really quickly, and that I reflect back on now, and I'm like going,
well, it kind of depends,
why didn't you guys ask me if I know what it means? Which, by the way, I knew what it meant.
Like a large percentage of all features
but why didn't you ask the question like,
so what's the value of those features? 0?
What can we do to make it not suck?
And then, of course, the problem is,
and again, it's not a really nice word, but it is what it is. It's expressive, and it tells expression today, right? So
every new
so that's what this is about. This whole discussion we're talking about today.
And it gets harder to
trying to make things suck less.
It gets harder to build. It gets harder to test. It gets harder to maintain. And if it's
who all in here? And I know this is really corny. I hate asking people to raise their hands, but I'm going to do it anyways. Who on here is working on teams that are adopting Agile or
it might not even be 0. It might actually be negative.
Awesome.
Some of the really good
got the right room.
Now start actually.
So you guys all are aware of hopefully that we have like these things called practices and principles and values and stuff. So we have like we have the normal Scrum things, practices we do. We have our XP stuff, practices we do. We have our lean Kanban stuff, practices we do.
Are they completing
DevOps,
our shopping cart?
And also now we now have more scaling stuff.
In our budget
so
program,
quite a few practices, quite a few things that we have to kind of.
That's great, but
everyone kind of expects us to be good at and understand and know.
If my goal is to increase revenue,
but we have principles,
then
right?
maybe I really want to steer people towards higher margin items.
We got to add some principles in here. So we have our 12 Agile principles, right?
It might not actually be all that beneficial.
And then you have. We have lean, which thankfully they're just a few words. They're lean, right? Just a few words.
Then yes, getting people
we
to
have
check out as often
all of our
as they
DevOps.
Yeah,
those are all DevOps. And again, by the way, DevOps. If you go searching for DevOps practices and principles, you can get a lot of stuff. So if you're a researcher like me,
maybe that's
and
what
you use Google, you can get a lot of stuff. And then, of course, we have all the scaling stuff.
Who wrote the impact mapping book.
And they have their own.
Did a presentation at the LESS conference in Amsterdam last year. And
you have organizational stuff. But then wait, we're not done, right? These are just trying to help us make good decisions. But then we have to, words to live by. So we have values. So we got to fit those things in. And everybody has to, this is how we expect people to walk, walk the walk. So you got to be, not just do. So you have, the Scrum ones, we have, I think that's the, safe ones.
It was an Agile project.
And then we have, DevOps on. So, and again, guys, this is just scratching the surface. So there's a lot of stuff we ask people to know and be good at.
Every couple of weeks. So
luckily, they overlap.
Just blame it on waterfall.
And I think in a few years, everybody's going to stop using all the terms and just say,
apparently what happened is that the product managers actually used the very iterative nature of this project to constantly redefine what it was all about. Right? Just like, oh, well, It took them, Goiko actually refers to this as this squirrel-driven product management.
Safety, productive. All right, so these are all things, happy teams. These are all things I expect to hear from folks that have been practicing Agile. What about this guy, the pointy-hair manager? Who's a pointy-hair manager in here? Who's been one? Yeah, so what about these folks? What's high-performing to them? Predictable, consistent, right. One that delivers, yeah. On time, on budget. That's kind of the, that mindset. When you start going up the ladder, you're expecting people to hit their commitments, and that's what they think is high performance, right? Whereas at the team levels, we're generally thinking happy teams. We're thinking people that get along, safety. We're thinking room. So again, I'm a researcher. Sorry about that. I'm a researcher, and I asked my team at VersionOne, and I searched Google. So. Quality, absolutely. A good team. And by the way, I'm going to change the term. One of my team members, he said, high performing. Usually, when we talk to clients that talk about high performance as a goal, they're usually very, very immature in their mindset. Usually very, very immature in their mindset, meaning that they just haven't grokked what's the true value of some of the things we do, right? Not thinking that same way. So, quality, absolutely. Quality is top of mind. We don't want to redo stuff. We want to be proud of our work. We go ahead and customer focus, and we make users great. I was going to say make users badass, but I'll say that out loud. But our goal is to make, like when I work with clients, my goal is not to really make just that person great. I want them to look good in front of their boss. I want them to look good in front of their team. So that's, and I want a team to look good in front of other teams. That's, so that's what we want. We want our customers to be happy. Who's read Tribal Leadership? Great book. Old book. I say old, 2008. It's ancient in people sciences and stuff. But Tribal Leadership, and again, it's all about psychological sciences and a bunch of, they talk about this thing like having shared core values and a noble cause. It's called stage 4. They refer to it as stage 4. But teams that talk they use the word we a lot. They're happy, they're successful. They might still throw darts at other teams, but their team rocks. They're really happy. They're we. And then the last one, the common virtues. They have the same kind of belief system. Like we actually had a team member on our team, and humble is not his key thing. It's not on our team anymore. Humility is key. So shared virtues. And then, of course, Google, which actually, their people ops did a study, Project Aristotle, to find out what they're high performing, what are the qualities, the key dynamics of high performance teams. Expecting with their hypothesis being it's going to be the pedigree, the tenure, the most senior folks, and stuff like that. And of course, what came out of it was kind of some of the things you guys just reverberated in the room was, psychological safety. People feel they can fail in an organization. You have, dependability. We've heard that from the management perspective. Structure and clarity. I know my role. I know how I can make the team successful. I'm allowed to step around, but I know my role. I know how I can make an impact. And of course, meaning and alignment to our visions and such. So great stuff. By the way, just do a quick search on Project Aristotle. There's some really great articles out there. I've noted some books in the lower right-hand corner. Charles Duhigg it's that Power of the Habit. His follow-on book I really liked. That's the Smarter, Faster, Better, and he talks about a lot about different teams and how they leverage these kind of concepts. Tells a great story about Saturday Night Live. All right, and hey, we're always continuously improving. So I know working at VersionOne, we pretty much know we're not good in certain areas. We know where we're not good. And we're constantly trying to say, hey, what can we do better? We can't do everything, right? You can't do everything, but what can we constantly try to do to continue to move the needle, make happy customers, deliver quality, make our stakeholders happy, make those around us, and make sure we're having fun doing it. So that's kind of when we look at what a good team. So who has been a part of, who's trained teams? Come on, who's been in an Agile boot camp, right? So who has not had somebody in class at the end of the class say, what do we do next? Okay. And they actually go back and they say, hey, well, we were just told to come in here to this class and learn this. And then this expected to go back. And now, years ago, my answer would have been, oh, and you guys need some coaching, right? You guys need some coaching. You need somebody in there that's kind of seen it before, can do both some coaching and mentoring. Hey, I've done this before. Here's some experiences I've had. That's all fine and good, right? But it doesn't make people experts. It gets them over the hump. So I don't know if anybody's read I say the old, it is an old book, the Lean Software Development by Bob and Dykes. So Mary talked about in there deliberate practice and practicing. And I don't think it went much farther than that. Esther Derby talks about it, a few other consultants talk about it, but it doesn't get talked about a lot. So until recently, which is cool. So that's what I tell people now, by the way. I said, guys, you're not just going to be good at it. It's like a stand-up act. A stand-up comedian. They do so many, they pop in those sideshows because they practice their jokes. They take notes on what doesn't work and what does work. And they tweak those things. You don't just get great overnight. You've got to work at it. So teams got to remember that. So to better practice, there's some key messages and this, as I was going through this. One, if someone believes, and there's organizations that have that kind of the mindset, they don't believe they can get better. They're kind of beaten down. It is kind of sad. I don't know. I'm looking around the room. I think everyone's probably worked on teams or worked with teams or at least individuals that are like, man, it's just not going to get any better. So they got to not have that mindset. We got to get them out of that. Because there's this concept of grit. And grit basically is I can envision myself successful. So when things get really bad, I still can see that light. So they can stick to it. They can stay with it. Environment, you got to have a safe environment for this stuff to work. So when we talk, we're going to go through some exercises and talk about some of this. But if the team doesn't have the tools in place, or they can't feel like they can fail, then we have a problem. And of course, the last one is this concept of deliberate practice. So let's kind of get into each one of these real quick. So grit, Angela Duckworth is the one that's done most of the study on this. And by the way, guys, that's another great thing. In the last 10 years, people sciences have just gone through the roof. Businesses adopted psychology. So, and of course, we in this room, everyone in here are amateur psychologists. So, and there's a lot of great books. So like Angela Duckworth talking about grit and going through, and not only do you talk about grit, but also how do you, as somebody who can attain grit, how do you set goals? How do you move forward? And like, she talks about having tiered goals, which is, again, things we teach. You can have the big, hairy, audacious, instead of ours, hairy, audacious goals. BHAGs, yeah, or BMW goals, those things that, hey, and that we need that helps us pull ourselves out and really strive for something. But then there's also, like, what are those intermediate steps so I can feel good that I'm reaching that light? So that's important. Environment, Ed Catmull, anybody read this one? This is another great book. Creativity Inc. So Ed Catmull is, the CEO of Pixar, Disney. And if you go through and hear about his story, it's been all about how do I build a creative environment. The great part about the story is he talks about just getting Steve Jobs to turn his head around to endorse a creative environment and get into that world. And his job, and he mentions here, and he talks a lot about management, and it's their job to be underneath the people to make sure they have that environment with them. Now, environment not only doesn't mean just a safety environment, it also means we have the right boxes. It means we have the right tools. So all the DevOps talks we're going through today, having the environments that we can actually try stuff. So like I was working with a client, and they said, hey, this is awesome. I finally got them to buy off. We're going to do some hack day. And I'm like, awesome. All right, let's start making the list of stuff you got to get ready to do. He's like, we just can't go do. I'm like, no, man, the teams are going to want environments. They're going to want things to be able to, and they're going to want, lab spaces and things like that to be able to go actually do their hack. You got to make sure that's there for them. And so the same thing with practice, and we have teams, you got to have the environment for people to be able to, if, I can go do changes on some code, and maybe, we say refactoring. Refactoring is a great form of practice. I'm just going to go change this code, go ahead and rewrite this totally, and just to learn, but yeah, I'm going to throw it away. Rewrite a function 10 times is a great way to practice coding. So, anyways, provide an environment. And of course, deliberate practice, this concept of deliberate practice. So who's Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers? Who's read that one? That's a really good book, really fun book, right? Talks about all the different stories of all these different people. And Malcolm made, it's the 10,000-hour mastery. And that's where that kind of was born from. And really was born from K. Anders Ericsson. His research on violinists and chess players. And this is his latest book. It's called Peak. And he's only done a couple books. Yeah, I'm about to hit that. Because what it is basically when it came out, and that concept came out, I mean, it was a range. So the studies basically said, for these violinists, they found to become, if you call masters, head in their orchestras and concert violinists, it was from 7,500 to something like 1,200 or 12,000 hours they would spend, and they would track throughout the life of somebody, from a prodigy kid that people label from practicing as a kid on up to like the early 20s. And so that's what he tracked all this and tried to understand this. But where it kind of got debunked was, in the 10,000 hour thing got debunked is that, like, well, Malcolm kind of missed out on this thing. It's not that you just go do something for 10,000 hours and be great at it. You gotta do this, what he calls deliberate practice. And and what that means is basically we gotta have mechanisms. Actually, let me just show let's go forward 2 slides. We gotta have some things. You gotta be obviously you gotta be motivated to do it. It's structured practice, meaning that I have a goal in mind I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get feedback from somebody on it. So I can't just go do it over and 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 over again. And that builds up conditioning. So that's why I have this little slide here. That's this conditioning. That's just getting, again, people who do training. I saw some of the hands. I'm sorry, what's your name? Chad. So if you do a 2-day boot camp, if you do them often, if you do it once, you're just exhausted, right? At the end of the day, if you do it like once every 6-8 weeks, you get down to the classes, you're just drained. Your legs are dead. You're just done. You do a round of those for about 4 weeks. By about the second week, you're like, it's child's play. Because you're conditioned. Your body's conditioned. Your mind's conditioned to do it. So, and by the way, what it's also not, again, it's not just, you want the really key thing about deliberate practice, it's not just doing your job. Doing your day-to-day job is not enough. Now, this is where it really gets hard for us. Because especially if you have, and I'm just going to use, I don't know, the only way to say is contract people. If you're a contractor working for somebody, they're expecting you to be delivering stuff while they're paying you. So how are you going to get time to practice things? So we got to come up with ways to weave in practice into what we're actually doing. So let me keep going through some of this. So really, and this is 6 steps, and I kind of, another guy kind of got this out of Kay Anders' the Peak book. But if you just go down the line here, so 1, you got to want it, right? You got to set realistic goals. And like I said, the goal model, just to draw it out for you guys, hopefully you've seen this before, but it's just a tiered model for how do I get to something. And this is what Angela Duckworth kind of models out. And let's go after that first layer and set goals to achieve this. And then set goals to achieve this and set goals to achieve this. And these will help us grow just grow in our skill sets. Not just, and I'm not talking about business goals, right? This is different. This is how we want to be better. The third one's really important. Break out of your comfort zone. So if you're doing it day in, day out, it's routine. You're not good at it. Well, maybe you are. But it's routine. It's one of those things where it's muscle memory now. Not necessarily expert. And that might, and by the way, you can, guys, all this stuff we're talking about, that might be fine. That might be that just barely good enough. I don't need to focus on that area, and I don't want to focus on that area. So that might be fine, but get out of your comfort zone. Consistent and persistent. Of course, this does come back and do it. Do it over again, get the feedback. Do it over again, get the feedback. That feedback loops that we talk about all the time. And of course, seek feedback. So if you are, and we're going to go, like I said, go through an exercise here in a second and try this out a little bit and define some. But if you ask a team to say, hey, our stand-ups really stink, man. What can I do? All right, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just jump online. There's the Dysfunctional Scrum. Why don't we download that, play it out, we'll do some role-playing, and then maybe talk to each other and see how we might respond differently. All right, it's a good little exercise, right? It's a way to learn. But if some coach is not in there, or somebody else, maybe another Scrum Master or another team member from another group is not in there saying, you guys' body language is totally off. And I know we're playing a role play and stuff like that, and you're probably kidding around, but do you guys realize how kind of hostile you sound to each other? Is that normal? That's kind of the feedback we want to hear people have, right? And those kind of things you want people to seek. Time to recover, last one. So it's kind of obvious, hopefully. Our brains only have so much capacity to get stuff done. Who's been on you guys, we're doing Agile stuff, but we still deliver software. Who's been on the Walking Dead type projects recently? Look, that's awesome. So recently, I've been on a Walking Dead type project, meaning we work 12-hour days, and a few times 15, 16-hour days for about 3 weeks. And honestly, I think we all wanted to kill each other at the end. Great team, loved each other at the beginning, wanted to kill each other at the end. We were the zombies. We were wanting to eat each other and just kill each other. And that was solely because, and honestly, our quality output, you can plot it. It was bad. At the end of the day, we got through it. We cycled through it. We all stood back when we all do our retro and go, man, guys, we said it like multiple times. Time to stop. No, just keep going. I can keep going. I got a couple more hours in me. Let's keep going. And no one want to leave each other, right? Because you have loyalty to each other. So we killed ourselves. So time to recover is important. Time to step back and say, hey, let me ride this. It's kind of like also with who has startup Scrum teams that you're trying to start up? Anybody? When you how long do you give them before you say pivot? You know what I'm saying? Before you say, make some adjustments. Just in you guys' experience. Just I'm asking the question.
I try to give them at least an iteration and then save things for retrospective.
Right.
Sometimes I give them longer depending on what the change is.
Right.
Break it down. It just depends on the context.
Yeah, unless they're really like they have carpet burns on the side of their face, they're really stumbling really bad, you just kind of let them do little tweaks. And eventually you might say, okay, guys, this isn't working. But you let them get to a point where, okay, you've had all this change, let's make some change now. One group I'm working with, you guys, who's involved in safe projects here? No, several of you guys are. I've ran a few of you guys. So have you done enough PI events where they're kind of routine? Like boring as all get out? No? Okay, good. You'll get there. I mean, honestly, about the third or fourth one, you'll get there. There's one group I'm working with, they decided instead of doing three months, they wanted faster feedback loops, kind of like doing the 1 week sprint, we did 1 month. And they're sticking to it. It's been a year. And I'm like, guys, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to stick bamboo shoots underneath my fingernails. This is the most boring thing ever, so let's make some adjustments. Let's shake it up a bit. Let's get out of our comfort zone. So what are the things we can introduce to this? Or, you guys, this is working great. Let's just shrink the time box. That's what we'll do. Yeah. Right. It's the small changes. It's the incrementals. It's just move to that next level. You don't jump up. What's the next small goal we're going to go after? So like with this group I'm talking about, it's like, hey, we never used a program board type concept. I'm like, guys, we have dependencies and we've been rooting them out and done a great job, you guys talking and stuff like that. But let's step back and make it really visible and let's try to see if we can't introduce that concept to the conversation. So just introducing small tweaks. It's really, you got to measure how much change your group can take. It's kind of like I ran into somebody earlier that talking about their teams are flipping to Kanban from Scrum and back and forth, right? We've seen that. And when you do those flips sometimes, it's some major upheaval. Some teams, they handle it just great because they're kind of already operating that way. But, you got to measure the team, right? What's their tolerance for change? As well as how again, back to the time recovery. If you've had a team organization, I don't know about Nike, but I know a couple of organizations I've been working with, we've had enough, I've been working with them long enough, I'm like going, guys, I don't want to introduce any process change because you guys just reorged. Why should we introduce process change in the middle of that? People are already twitchy. Let them take what they're still good at it and let that ride it out a little bit, and then we'll start doing some more enhancements. So. The one thing about this, I'm sorry, go ahead,
when you say,
Samantha.
Break out of your comfort zone and you're talking about a team that works well as they are and maybe just shorten the sprint, is it breaking out of the comfort zone for the purpose of actually just doing that to see what happens, or?
It's, again, remember, it's more for practice. So let me limit this. So you can do it. So, and we got to talk about how do you do the practice on the job. So I'm trying to think of a really good example. So we had a team that was doing code reviews. They're doing a good job, code reviews, guys. Got monotonous. You guys just started getting into things where, of course, we actually had check style and all those other things that were checking automated checks, but this was just giving feedback. And the feedback just pretty much got to them, that's good. Approved, push, go. It was all fine. So then our change there is because with feedback stuff, we went to good code, bad code sessions. We started doing or people call them the WTF sessions, where you say, bring in a piece of code and review it and say, hey, I really liked this code I just found. And I'll walk you through why, the structure or something like that, or this was a unique way to refactor. I saw this code that so-and-so did, and that's fine. And the team has to feel safe, right? Because it can be really bad if the team's not getting along really well. But then, somebody will throw up some, hey guys, this is some really crappy code, and somebody's like, oh crap, that's fine. But it happens, and hey, well, how can, and then the team together, in these cases, they're like doing like mob programming, like, well, how can we make this better? And it's a very non-accusatorial type approach. It's like, hey guys, how can we make this better? And because the person's like, I didn't have enough time. I'm like, cool, that's fine. So we changed it up that way. Got them totally out of their own comfort zone, like I said, because they were used to this thing, rubber stamping everything. And so, yeah. All right. So, how can we get better at all this stuff? So, guys, I liked Lean Canvas and and all that stuff and Business Canvas and stuff like that. But I always like, okay, this is a good way to organize your thoughts. But I never really actually used it. And I was working with a guy recently who's doing not SPT, he's a CST, Lowell Lindstrom. But he's like one of the first ones. And Lowell was telling me, he's like, hey, look, like I came up with this new meeting canvas. I'm like, that's freaking awesome. I'm going to steal that. So leveraging the idea, I wanted to come up with a way to, because I've always laid out these kind of practice sessions just on a whiteboard. So I wanted to come up with a way that we can repeat it and create a library of practice. So, and we just started capturing it in wikis and stuff like that, but then I started just stepping back, okay, let's make a canvas. So let me walk you guys through this, and I'm going to kind of walk up here. I can see the monitor up here, so I don't read this thing too much. So also, obviously, area to improve what it is. Coaches, feedback, we need to ask somebody to give us feedback. By the way, that's a really hard thing, by the way. For some teams don't like to go into other teams and say, yeah, you're not good. And you got to ask the right person too, because if you have somebody that's too strong of a personality the other team's like doesn't respect, it's a problem. So this is that's actually one of the hardest pieces about this, is finding the person to give feedback. If you have a coaches available, or even leaders on the teams, managers of the teams that give good constructive feedback, bring them in. The other hard part is the skills. And what I mean by skills is if we go back to here, all this stuff we're asked to do, these are more activity-based stuff. I mean, they're things like story mapping. Well, what are the skills required to do story mapping? It's communication, it's meeting facilitation, it's different brainstorming techniques, it's negotiations. There's all kinds of other, and they're mostly soft skills in that case. But what are those skills that we have to develop and practice? So when you think about any type of deliberate practice, you're not practicing story writing. Because if you're practicing story writing, well, we can all type pretty well or write pretty well on cards. So it's about figuring out what are the skills. So that's really hard. Now the goals aren't so hard. Goals are, and I say they're not so hard. I honestly, every single time I've asked a team, said, hey, let's figure out what we're not good at, and then how much better do you want to be? What do you think is attainable? The only key here is, of course, it's the whole SMART thing. Make it measurable. I don't preach SMART that often, the SMART goal thing, but this needs to be measurable. We need to be able to say how we can get it right. The comfort zone, obviously, is asking people like if you have a team, this is where a coach helps. Coach can say, hey, you guys, the coding thing. I was like, you guys have kind of this like collective code ownership to a whole new level, and you're scared to call each other out. So I think that's going to be your comfort zone, getting to a point where you're able to start giving more constructive feedback. The actual practice itself, and again, this could be really hard or really easy. All these books on the side, those are all resources. As a matter of fact, Tim Ottinger, that top book there, which is available on LeanPub, it's all about this. He has about 13 different scenarios and different practice ideas for Scrum Masters to use. So really good little book. And then, of course, the feedback we want, participants, environment, identify the environment. Environment's really key. When I first started trying to leverage this practice concept, I kind of just expected the team to figure that out. But I've quickly learned we need to be explicit about saying, oh, what do you need? Let's make sure we line that up. And then the last one, the bottom one, and I kind of restated this recently, the hypothesis, I like that term, right? It's test-driven development type stuff, is what do we know when it's kind of done? When is it green? When do we think we're good to move on to the next set of goals? So it's one of those things that's just, until we get to that point, so hypothesis might not be the right word, because, you fail, you might just walk away. But in this case, I wanted to get it to green. How do I get to green? So what I'm asking you guys to do, let's look at time here. We're good. We're good, really good on time. So on the tables here, I put out some copies of this. And inside it, actually, I have some examples and then this same slide. So what I'd like you guys to do is, and I didn't ask you guys to introduce yourself since most of you guys work at Nike. I figure you guys can figure that out yourself. But make sure you know, if you don't work at Nike, make sure you introduce yourself to each other. And what I suggest you do is just grab one of you guys' problems. And grab a very immediate, one that you guys feel pretty connected to. And try to go knock this out. And I say, get as many things as you can get done. But make sure we do the skills and the practice. So I'm going to give you like 10 minutes. I'm going to kind of walk around. Let me know if you have any questions. And because I have some ideas, so if I need to share those, I can. But let's take 10 minutes, and then we're just going to review a few and then kind of recap. So. And by the way, if there's not enough copies, let me know. I think we might be able to redistribute, or I can get you a PDF.
Okay. We're supposed to work through them individually?
I would recommend working two as a team. Yeah, just pick one of you guys. You guys spit it out and say, I got a really hard one I'd like us to work on. Take control if you want. How you guys doing? You guys progressing pretty good. All right, let's, guys, time. I'm going to, who has one, at least one or two we can share? We went over the 10 minutes, but I think that's good. Yeah, you can't see it's hard. This is not an easy thing to do the first few times. You will find it once you get a few of the techniques down, it gets easier. And as well as that's why, the reason why I wanted you guys to work together as a team is that when you work together as a team on this, in this practice, it's really hard for one person to come up with the great ideas, right? You get multiple people in the room say, well, I tried this one time, I tried this one time, I tried this one time. It makes a big difference. So anybody have one or two things? Let's just talk about the practices, or how far did you guys get? Sure, go ahead.
So we got through basically the goals.
Okay, cool.
But I think it actually touches on other parts anyway.
Okay.
Because of the discussion.
What was your problem?
The problem was QA team being siloed and having sort of a control and manage approach. Like the buck stops here, we get to make the decision. As opposed to a collaborative part of the team.
Yeah.
So the skills were soft skills, improve communication skills, take a consultant approach, teach to consult, demos, cross-training, and leader responsibilities. We took that idea really to heart, giving QA the lead on a ceremony, for example, such as, so those are the skills.
Right, cool.
To the goals. Participate, first we said participate in the retro and grooming, which they already do.
Right.
But lead the retro so that they take ownership of that process as opposed to being over here on the side.
Yeah,
how they feel.
Yeah.
Take ownership for it and then debrief with, say, the Scrum Master. Like, how did that feel? What did you get out of it?
Cool, awesome. And that's kind of, and you can probably, one of the things that, who measures how many often do you guys do retrospectives? I mean, some organizations, that's actually a goal. That's actually an organizational-wide goal. It's kind of like one-on-one meetings. Organizations that really kind of stink with having communication between their leader and their person. You'll walk in, and next thing you know, you'll see a dashboard of what's percentage of one-on-one meetings happening. Just simply because people get they get wrapped around time and stuff like that, and they just stop doing it. So you kind of you force it by measuring it and say, hey, how often is who's driving the retrospective? Or how many retrospectives since the front Scrum Master facilitated? Some stupid little thing like that will drive people to change kind of some of the behaviors. So, all right, anybody else want to share one? Yeah, you guys. Yeah.
I think we have three interesting things in the non-conference number 3.
Okay, can you share your problem?
Yeah, the problem is priority planning work.
Priority planning work.
Too much work.
All right.
Not getting any of all of them that way.
Cool.
So the non-comfort zones that we came up with is first, across the table, unable to say no. It is not because we've been told not to say no. It's just that I think we don't have that skill.
Right.
It's not something that we do. If it's a yes, we're comfortable with it. If it's a no, we can't do this, and we can't do it over the next whatever many months. We don't do that. Then, not okay with failure, right? I think that we talk about being okay with failure, learning from it. But when we actually have to fail, then we're hiding it. We're trying to
Right.
protect the team away from failure. Where that's what we were looking for, right? To see what we learn as it goes. And then finally, something that we can't do at all: challenge authority, right? If we have a customer or a boss or whatever, it's very difficult in safety to go and challenge the direction. Like if we go to do 10, we can only do 5. Not only that we can't say no, we can't go to our bosses about it.
Right.
I think these are all skills that to make this really work,
Yep.
we have to get maybe a little better at, right? That should be one of our
Cool. I would throw negotiation skills. I'd probably have to be one of the first things I would probably start teaching the team is negotiation skills. Do your radio voice. You ever heard that? Teach people how to talk in their radio. It's calm radio voice. If you ever want to say no to somebody, you actually get them to say no first, then you can say no. Do you want this project to fail? No. So we're not going to be able to make all those things. Yes, you got to practice your radio voice. Anyways, that's great. Okay, we have time for maybe. Well, actually, we have time for one more. Let's go into one more. Anybody want to? Any other shout outs? You don't have to.
Talk about just being able to
Cool. Cool. Did you guys talk about any of the skills required for that? Or maybe some practice anyways? Okay. Right. Very cool. So, yeah, and one of the things that, and I mentioned it in here, but one of the other things we've done, and it might, after talking to you guys, this might play there too. Introduce like gamification. It sounds weird, guys, but like leaderboard stuff. And what I mean by that is how often are we getting feedback, and kind of come up with badges and stuff like that. And it sounds stupid, or stars, gold stars. I mean, you come up with a scoreboard. You guys, who's heard of Cheesy? Jeff Morgan? He's like the guy who's done Cucumber and stuff like that, and kind of one of the really fun guy, really super smart guy. And I was talking to him one time, and they used it's the old how productive type chart. I mean, how much time did I spend on what? But they did it in Legos. And so it turned the team, because they were having problems with, the team wasn't reporting how much time did we spend on productive time versus non-productive time. So everyone came up with different Lego patterns and different colors that represented productive versus non-productive. And the idea is that, the productive was just the green. Everything else was non-productive. And you couldn't see the green at the end of the day. So there's just little different techniques, so to try those kind of things. Cool. So any questions? I mean, any thoughts? You guys hopefully have found some of this valuable. What do you guys think?
How much time do you think being up as a 6 or 7 years you may use it, or will it take to fill this all in?
So probably the first couple times, it's a lot longer. And I say a lot longer, but I mean, in starting to work with the teams and brainstorm. So I usually do this with like a few of the Scrum Masters or a few of the team leads that maybe brought the problem up. And we said, okay, well, let's just kind of just brainstorm. And like I said, I typically do just brainstorm this stuff on a whiteboard. And usually in 30 minutes. We walk away with at least an idea. I mean, you don't need to have 10 different practice ways. You need to have an idea. Let's go try it. I firmly believe in experimenting. So let's go try it. Let's see if we could start seeing some of the results we wanted. Again, it depends on how you communicate. It does, right? I mean, I've been facilitating it some for a while, so I'm sure the first time it'll take longer. Like you guys were talking, and I know some of you guys, it's harder too when you always all have your own retrospective item. But if everyone just got done talking about it at the end of retrospective, okay, well, guys, what could we go practice to do? And like I said, one of the hardest things you'll do on this is if you're working on a team that's primarily responsible, they're funded by delivering stuff. So how do we do it within that? And so what I've done in the past is maybe we carve out 15 or 30 minutes at the end of a stand-up. So we're not being too disruptive. Or like I said, we build it in as part of our normal SDLC type process of, hey, let's do it as part of code reviews. We did a refactoring hack session one time. Meaning let's go through and let's force refactoring to happen by going in and say, let's stop, guys, and let's spend a couple hours and just do refactoring. Everybody gets to get in a room. Let's do it. So anyways. All right, guys. I always leave with this. I think I have a second. I love this little thing. It's basically a story of a guy in an abbey. This is his inscription. You can read it, but summarize it up. He tried to change the world. Figured he couldn't change the world. Tried to change his local church, his local community where he worked in. Couldn't change that. Tried to influence his family, but it was too late. Should have started with himself. So you always got to start with yourself. So if you want to make change happen, people have to start with themselves. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it. If you guys want any of this, any PDFs.